and thank you for being with us. You are the light. Shine within us now. You are the Word. Sound within us now. You are the door. Open to us now. Open to the realization of your love, your divine love within us now. We got into we're into the image of the play and last night, and we're into stories. So I want to start off with a quotation from, if you know, I don't know whether you have this book. You probably do, yeah. Whoever did the paperback knew exactly what passage to put on the front. It's, I think perhaps I haven't read the book, so I can't be sure, but it strikes me as very probably the most beautiful piece in the book, as far even as far as writing, but as far as the thought. I'm going to start off with that. Because we, last night, I said, there we go, pop, we're on the stage, we're in the scene. Well, I said we all arrived in the scene one time, huh? He says, suddenly we are. We find ourselves in interaction with ourselves, our family and friends, society and institutions, and the universe. In our interaction with these environments, we become aware of a dimension of mystery which transcends yet suffuses every experience. This awareness is sacramental. Almost any finite experience can precipitate it. When we reach our limits, when we deeply dialogue, when our ordered worlds collapse, when we cannot enact our moral ideals, when we are disenchanted, we often enter into the awareness of mystery. We are inescapably related to this mystery, which is immanent and transcendent, which issues invitations we must respond to, which is ambiguous about its intentions, and which is real and important beyond all else. Our dwelling within mystery is both menacing and promising, a relationship of exceeding darkness and undeserved light. In this situation, and with this awareness, we do a distinctively human thing. We gather together and tell stories of God to calm our terror and hold our hope on high. I wish I had written that, but I'm glad it's written. Well, I've reached my limits, and my ordered world has collapsed, and I'm into telling stories of God. And the story I'm telling is that we are God's story in two senses. We are the story He is conceiving, dreaming. He doesn't have to write us. He just sees us, and there we are. He has a vivid imagination and a fierce creative energy. So He is the author and the delighted audience of His show, His story, this drama we find ourselves in. We are God's story in that sense. And we are God's story in this sense that we are His image and likeness. We're would-be knower lovers like He is, placed on the stage to play that part. But as we know, we were blowing the part. Nothing makes for a more ungodly act than for the player to come on stage with his nose buried in his script, like me, clinging to his supposed role. Well, God knows that, and that's why he refuses to supply a script. He figures the script is built right in. God says, you're made like God, mind and heart, feeling, common sense and love, compassion, ingenuity, energy, life. What more do you need? Just get in the scene and meet whatever's going on and act like God. Cues? Things will cue you if you just pay attention to them. Let them speak. Your lines? I want lines. Your lines? You mean you want to have a pre-packaged response? Wow, what a dull play you want. You don't need lines and long sentences to play God to the world. You know, to play Hitler or to play Shakespeare maybe. But to play God to the world, you don't need lines and long sentences. If you're at a loss for words, he says, just try some of my typical words, like hurrah, yippee, right on, good man, keep it up, yeah. That's always a good one, yeah. But you don't really need lines. The situation will push your buttons if you let it. And the lines will come out. Like, if it's a tough scene, tough situation, about all you need to say in response is, it's a pretty rough situation. Or what amounts to the same thing, I hear you. I'm sorry it's that way for you. You don't have to be a genius to play me, God. I'm a very simple fellow. Well, that's what he says. But that ain't the way things went, as we all know, and as he finally realized. So he got into the act, came in his Son to do the part once and show us how. And we all know what a fiasco that was. But he still won't admit it. He's still saying, it's okay, it's going to be all right. He doesn't know when to quit, and he doesn't know how to be satisfied, leave well enough alone. He just has this compulsion to overdo things, that like the brother at our place, who is convinced that if a quart of water is good for the cactus plant, then 50 gallons must be much better. I know 100 stories about God that illustrate these weaknesses of his. Well, let me be charitable and non-judgmental. I'll just call them his characteristic style. I've got one that I'd love to make a short film of, but it's impossible. It would demand in one man an incredible combination of craftsman and clown, or comic. I thought of cartoon animation or trick photography. I'd give it the title Jeremiah 18:4. That would be the title. I've never been a movie director. I can dream. I'll start with 18. The word that was addressed to Jeremiah by Yahweh. Get up and make your way down to the potter's house. There I shall let you hear what I have to say. So I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, working at the wheel. And whenever the vessel he was making came out wrong, as happens with the clay handled by potters, he would start afresh and work it into another vessel, as potters are wont to do. That's the fourth. Whenever the vessel he was making came out wrong, as happens with the clay handled by potters, he would start afresh and work it into another vessel, as potters are wont to do. Potters don't call their shots beforehand. You see, I'm looking at this, my film now. I'm going to describe my film. I'm looking at this crazy, wobbly world of ours. And the image that comes up in my mind is like this movie screen and a kind of shiny vortex, a whirlpool of stars or light on black. That's the start. Only as the camera backs up, it's revealed as the spinning concentric circles of a potter's wheel. It's picking up sparks of light as the hand of the potter flicks drops of water on it from his fingertips. The camera swings up to his face. It's a slightly lugubrious, whimsically pathetic face. It's the optimistic, somewhat puzzled face of, yes, the clown, but without makeup. This is more the comic than the overt clown. And he is caught viewing the spinning table, somewhat pensively, even a bit apprehensively. Is a kind of hovering, a kind of, well, what's this look? What's this? A look like that on his face. What's this? He looks up and a brief, unsure smile greets us, the audience, and then he's back in his scene. He's challenged by the spinning wheel and by the mass of clay, and the camera swings over and focuses on that alongside him. It's sitting there mildly menacing. The scene is the wheel, the clay, his hands, and his face, and then some other typical things of the potter. When I get to produce it, I'll... At any rate, the potter only gives the viewers an occasional shy and disconcerted or sometimes optimistic glance as the drama frequently unfolds. For the most part, he is totally engaged in a ludicrous struggle and an obviously disconcerting series of near misses, near glorious triumphs, alternating with near tragic defeats. For that is the plot. I'm giving you the plot. After looking sufficiently intimidated by the whole thing, he lightens a bit, brightens, turns up the work light, moistens the table in his hands like a happy surgeon or a concert artist, reaches confidently to scoop up a good gob of clay, slaps it masterfully on the wheel, and finds himself in a wild struggle to keep it there. Then there follows the comic's typical series of near tragedy, near glorious triumphs, and facial commentary, which I can't do, to himself and occasionally to the audience, as the clay seems to fight him, to squirm about uncontrollably, and then rise towards a glorious figure. Only, just as his smile rises behind it, it climaxes with an inward collapse or an outward bulge. Now, if there was such a human artist, I would have him first get the lump finally settled. And you have to, if you've done any of this, you have to center it, they say. Get the lump finally settled and centered, and look up relieved and content to be just holding it down in a smooth concentric mound between his fingers, between his two hands. And even as he smiled happily, it would squirt out in some direction, apparently escaping his control. His hands would pursue it, leap to contain it, wrestle with it, as it seemed to be asserting itself, he acting amazed and startled all the while at its emergence. And it's emerging, of course, into something beautiful. And then as he discovers this and realizes what is happening, he looks slyly pleased, happy, and relieved. He looks up at us, the audience, and just he's about to say, voila, there it is, wham, it goes to pot, takes off in another direction. So you get the picture. As with any clown, he goes through a series of near glories and near tragedies, all seemingly a mystery to him, and all seeming just to happen due to the perverse exuberance of that spinning clay. This would be the great artist, of course, the one who can do it while clowning about it. The culmination of the series is weary, happy triumph. There's one thing I don't think can be done that I want to express that frustrates me. If it could be done on film, the final piece, the finale, would be a piece, a vase or a solid form, doesn't matter, that would recapitulate all the previous forms that almost happened and crown them. You would see them all in, or at least see them being folded into, the final glorious work. And if it were technically possible, his final piece would take shape and he would slowly open his hands and his mouth. The closing scene would be of the piece spinning wet and shining and glorious, framed but not touched by the hands now, with him looking on in childlike, delighted discovery and wonder, mouth open, eyes wide, hands haloing the piece, and then at fade, his clay-spattered face would look up and grin conspiratorially at the viewer, on the edge of us all, bursting out in delighted laughter, if we don't cry. So that's my clown potter, image of God. What's the moral? Only a clod would add the moral, but I'm going to do it. The potter, the clown, that is the master who is so much a master that he can clown. He can be playful and flirt with disaster. What's the moral? Well, I don't know whether I'm coming to the moral, but there's something else in the image in this story of God besides that. The potter gets all tangled with his work. And it is a struggle, an agonia, an agony, a wrestling match of sorts. He sweats. Before it just all seems to happen, he sweats. Then he smiles. And the work does wobble and careen toward disaster at times. But the potter keeps at it, keeps his hands on the whirling, unruly clay until under his firmly loving touch it emerges not just the pot he seemingly had in mind at first, or the second, or the third, but all of that realized again in a creation far more glorious. The potter, to you it is given to know the secrets. The potter is God, and God is love, and love does such things, and nothing but love can do such things. Love is the only real power in the world. And God's way of dealing with the world is to love it into being and love it towards its fullness. And when it tries to destroy itself, what does he do? He loves it with infinite insistence. His heart says to each of us, be, be, be. And we say, no, no, no. And his heart beats harder within each of us and says, oh yes, be. And the agony, the wrestling match goes on. And both he and I sweat. He finally sweats blood. And all the world advises him to give up on such a rebellious and pusillanimous clod. 1 minute too stiff, the next minute too soft to mold. But he keeps working with infinite deftness and infinite reverence. Reverence for this dumb piece of clay. And he will not give up. And in the end, he wins. No, he more than wins. He triumphs. He loses nothing. He transforms every near disaster into a glorious facet of his final, more glorious work. Where sin abounds, grace superabounds. He doesn't know how to be moderate. It's one of his biggest faults. He does it all by being and remaining love. He never forgets to be love. I was saying something like this one day to Father Patrick, and he came back a few days later and told me he'd been pondering this, and all of a sudden he saw so vividly, he saw Jesus on the cross, hanging from the nails, as the greatest act of being in the history of the world. In this, that he would not be put off, turned from being and being to the full what he is. He would not swerve one eye blink from loving all that is with a total love. Pat saw everyone else beneath the cross rushing about and flailing the air like phantoms that make no sound and cast no shadow with their antics. Jesus alone stands there above the world and bees. And I say that this weakness is the greatest act of power in the history of the world. Hell and all its hate could not make his love waver, much less turn to hate, or even to the relative violence that we call power. He could have had 12 legions of angels. He chose to have more. Pure love. He chose to overwhelm his enemies with the power of the universe. He focused upon them the fullness, the ray of his pure love. He drowned the world in his absolute, life-saving yes. And he bowed his head and said, "It's done." And it is.